I'm George Galloway.
I'm Steve Topple.
Together, we are Topple Galloway. What a week it has been. A meteor hit the Earth
Yes.
that was 100 times more powerful in its explosive force than the atomic bomb at Hiroshima. By the way, on the subject of Hiroshima, we went to see Killing Rubinstein. No, the Rubinstein Kiss at the Southwark Playhouse. Devastating work on the judicial murder of Ethel and Julius Rosenberg
the
in New
McCarthy
York in
trial.
1953. It was, if you like, peak McCarthyism. There it is there, look. I really, really recommend it.
Yeah.
It's a really outstanding piece of work. But anyway, this meteor hit the Bering Sea with 100 times more than Hiroshima force. And nobody even noticed it, which shows how few people live around that area.
Can I just add on that point? I didn't even know about this, so that shows how widely reported it's
But
been.
imagine if it had landed in the middle of London, in the middle of Manhattan. It would have been the end.
Indeed, all our technology, George, all our wonderful exploits in space.
Exactly.
And they missed
and that would have been the end of that.
Yeah.
And it's pure happenstance that it landed in the sea off Russia, rather than, in the middle of London.
Indeed.
It's extraordinary how capricious the whole thing actually is. That could have been the end. Anyway, that's the least of our problems. In a week that has seen the mass murder of 50 Muslims and counting in Christchurch in New Zealand, I never thought I'd say those words.
No.
And in the wake of the terrorist atrocity by a former ISIS fighter in Chechnya, a Turkish-born resident of Utrecht in the Netherlands, a country most people associate with peace and tranquility. Not me, actually. I know it's dark underbelly. But most people think that the Netherlands is a pretty cool and liberal place, but it's very far from it. And in the week that Brexit descended from chaos to an omni-shambolic clusterfuck, I have no idea what we're going to talk about for the next half hour.
Shall we start with? Let's start with Brexit. I think let's get this monstrosity out of the way, as it were. But it does need to be discussed. I mean, so where we're at the minute, Bercow basically ruled out, didn't he, yesterday, that Theresa May can have her third vote on her monstrosity of a deal. Squawk Box did a very good piece, which is a very good explainer of Theresa May's situation now. So she can either pass a motion to end parliamentary convention, can't she?
Proroguing, you mean?
Proroguing, so yes, Parliament will be effectively dissolved.
The word prorogue means to postpone, but without dissolving an organisation.
Yeah, and so she can do that. That'd be quite an interesting move from her. Or she can push it through, can't she? Anyway, regardless. But Squawk Box reckons it will be in breach of the EU withdrawal legislation under Article 18 because the Parliament hasn't approved it. I mean, Bercow's effectively, like Tom Watson, done a bit of a pincer movement on her and completely trapped her in a sort of
and they didn't see it coming.
No, well, if reports to believe,
a bit like that meteor that hit the Earth.
Yeah.
They didn't see it coming.
Yeah, they didn't know about it.
In terms of news management, handled it very well. By the way, I'm no fan of Bercow because I've known him since his hanged Nelson Mandela days. I've known him since his Mandela as a terrorist days. I've known him since he was the secretary of the Monday Club. The Monday Club being effectively the national front inside the Conservative Party. So any of you looking to me to add to the panegyrics of little John Bercow, no thanks.
Can I just interject? I will second that. He's like Anna Soubry, another snake in the grass who comes across all liberal and always. He's compassionate conservatism. He's not at all. He's the worst kind of Tory because he tries to present an image which he's actually
I think so. However, even a stop clock and all that, I so despise Theresa May's deal that I would rather remain in the European Union and fight for a proper Brexit than to leave the European Union in name only, which is what her deal does. So, I'm really happy if Theresa May's deal crashes and burns, like that meteor.
Indeed.
And I'm even more detest Theresa May's Tory government, and I even more strongly want a general election. The end of Theresa May's government and a general election is much more likely now as a result of what Bercow did. But I've got to say this to you, Steve. What kind of democracy in 2019 allows one man the power to decide whether we go forward, go back, stand still, roll over, somersault? That's just not a democracy. And it's all because we have no constitution. We have no Bill of Rights. It's now, by a freak of circumstance, much of it of our own making, little John Bercow, who has 17.4 million Brexit people in his hands. That can't be right.
Of course it's not right, and I think what Brexit has underscored, not just the situation with Bercow, but more broadly, is the democratic deficits and the chaos in our democracy that we actually have, or the lack of, there's no democracy at all. It's also underscored for me, and Nicola quite rightly pointed it out, that this is of course exposing for all to see the collapse and the chaos within the Conservative Party as well.
Totally,
it's absolutely bizarre.
One of the reasons I backed Brexit was that it would burst the Tories wide open, and it has happened.
Absolutely, it has, and it's exposed for all to see. Whether in this day and age they can recover from that remains to be seen. If you believe mainstream media polling, some polls they say they're still ahead, etc., but the proof of the pudding will be in a general election.
Survation puts Labour ahead.
And
Survation was the only ones that got the last general election right, and we know that Corbyn and Labour generally, when the law kicks in and the most grotesque examples of bias cannot be continued in the broadcast media, not in the print, that Corbyn catches up. We know that he was 20 points behind
in
in 2017, and he came within an ace. And so the Tories are in big and deep trouble now, but so is Brexit. However, if it's true, as the media reports this morning, that she has written to Tusk asking for a 9-month to 12-month extension, that means the European parliamentary elections are on. That's why I'm suited and booted, because I'm going to be a candidate.
What's your organisation called?
I might even persuade Steve to come on it with me. The Brexit Alliance.
The Brexit, yes, that's right.
Lose the, just like the Facebook. Brexit Alliance. Has a number of benefits, that name. Not least is it comes very high up the ballot paper. It's one of the first.
There's something in that, isn't
there? There is
for
sure.
Something in
a European Parliament elections where the ballot paper will be as long as your arm. In fact, if they'd let me, I'd register it in French. Alliance Brexit. Because then you're guaranteed to be at the top of the ballot paper.
Yes.
It's got the word Brexit in it. Alliance Brexit, brackets, George Galloway, coming near you soon. No, Brexit is just one of the catastrophes of the week. The others were far more fatal, far more bloody. Let's start with New Zealand, Steve. Have you ever been in New Zealand?
No, I haven't.
1950s Britain.
Okay.
Architecturally, in terms of the ambience, maybe even slightly the politics. Immigrants are very small in number. Most of the original inhabitants have been disappeared by one means or another, and the whole raft of white immigration in the 50s, 60s has kind of set the place in stone or ossified it in some way, so that for me, someone of my age, it feels like driving around rural suburban Britain in the 1950s.
That's fascinating, because I suppose it's a bit like the Netherlands, really. You have this picture painted to you that's quite liberal and quite green and quite easygoing.
But not New Zealand has one of the highest percentages of gun ownership in the world, and until till today, might change tomorrow. You could roll up and buy a semi-automatic or an automatic weapon, and that's what this mass murdering fascist, I'm not even going to say his name, that's what he did. He rolled up in New Zealand, got himself an apartment, so he had an address, and started buying online in New Zealand an armory big enough for a small army. And then he used it. He would have kept on going. I don't know actually what happened. Maybe the police ramming him off the road. But he was headed for another mosque and then another. He was ready to... By the way, Muslims are way less than 1% of the population of New Zealand. The town where he grew up in Australia has 0 Muslims. 0.
Yeah.
And this sickness, is it a sickness or is it evil? It's an interesting discussion. Is this man ipso facto mentally ill because he massacred 50 people? Or is he perhaps not mentally ill, just evil, just possessed of the evil of the Nazi idea? I lean towards the latter. Where do you?
Yeah, I think that there are probably many factors involved, not least, as you say, the influence of Nazi sort of thinking and theology. I don't think there's any way, shape or form that mental health can be included in this. I think that's the usual media response when someone white goes around shooting at people.
Only if they're white.
Mental health, yeah. But we did see that originally. I mean, in the aftermath of the attack on the Saturday, the Mirror's front page was the angelic boy who turned into whatever. Yeah. I mean, just by that one word, you can see a sort of pushing of a slight agenda, even if it was subconsciously by the Mirror, saying that, oh, well, he used to be so wonderful, but now he's turned into this. They won't give that if it was a Muslim terrorist going around.
And that's only one step away from the next stage, which did happen on Sky, which is why it's been taken off in New Zealand, taken off the air, where they say, well, he was an angel. He turned into a devil. How could that have happened? Let's interview a rabid Islamophobic racist to give us a clue.
Yeah.
And along comes that guest and says, well, it's all these Muslim fundamentalist terrorists that are killing people here and killing people there. And it's radicalizing these angels.
Yeah.
When, of course, the opposite is the truth.
Yeah.
Radicalized, fanaticized, extremized Muslims are themselves a response to Western war and occupation and exploitation and division and imperialist devilment by Western countries. It's not that the white racists are now responding to Muslim radicalism, unless you think history began when Sky News turned up.
Indeed. I mean, I want to throw a question to you. How much blame can we place for the fomenting of views like this man who committed these atrocities in New Zealand? How much blame can we place at the door of the media, do you think? The corporate media?
I honestly think a lot. It might be witting, it might be unwitting. I'm not suggesting that Mr. Murdoch or the proprietors or whatever, that they sat down somewhere at Davos or Bilderberg or anything like that. I don't think anything like that happens. But, as I said at the time, in 2001, if you pump anti-Muslim rhetoric and hatred into the air to justify invasion, occupation, war throughout the world, you can't imagine that it isn't going to blow back and have its effect in your own country.
Yeah.
So although you're trying to demonize, Saddam Hussein, Colonel Gaddafi, whoever the late Bashar al-Assad, and Said Hassan Nasrallah, you could pick anyone. Although you're really aiming at him, you're polluting the atmosphere. Yes. And when the wind shifts, just like it did with these Bulgarian cops the other day, did you see that?
I did, yes. Yeah,
pepper spray. Oh, the wind's changed. It's going to come back, and it has come back and poisoned our own atmosphere. So I think the media has a lot to do with it, but the media itself is a reflection of our lived reality, not yours because you're a younger man. But I lived in the time when Britain had an empire and was only just beginning to think about withdrawing from it. I watched a little bit of a video last night. In 1906, Britain ruled 1/3 of all the people in the world from this little place. Yeah. And that little lobby in the House of Commons governed 1/3 of all the people in the world. Now, you can only do that if your premise is that we are superior to them. Yes. Otherwise, how can we possibly rule them?
Yeah.
And if we're superior to them, that makes them inferior to us. And if they're inferior to us, then, of course, we can call them as we please. We can treat them as we please, even if we are pretending it's for paternalistic reasons. So with a history like that, the sink of the imperialist mentality, the white supremacist, because that's what we're talking about here, the white supremacist mentality, it's hardly a surprise that racism is a big thing and that some people will try to organize that white supremacist idea, and that's what Nazism did, and it's what this guy appears to have been a devotee of.
Indeed, yes. And for me, George, you've hit on a very crucial point there, which is the history of this, because the narratives we've seen by all political colours, but particularly by the progressive left, the likes of Owen Jones and his little troop at Novara Media, has been that...
the luxury communists.
The luxury communists, yes, it's a contradiction in terms, isn't it? The narrative that's been pushed is it's the media to blame, it's the right-wing mainstream politicians to blame, etc., etc. No concept of the fact that it's also probably about 30 years of neoliberalism and the triangulation of Labour, which I always bang on about, which is also partly to blame in this, the centrism that got us to this point we're at now. However, what is missing from this whole debate is looking at it in terms of a broad range of history and a very long period of time. As you rightly pointed out, if you look back to the British Empire, the seeds were sown then, but for me, the ground was ploughed, if you like, stretching back centuries and centuries to the Crusades, right up to, again, the time period you talk of, where the Ottoman Empire was called the sick man of Europe and effectively colonised at the end of the First World War by Britain and France. And this othering of people, which is what happens to the Muslim community, they are othered, they're classed as sort of secondary to the other citizens, they're classed as an inferior group of people, they're classed as a dangerous group of people. This othering is almost ingrained in our DNA somewhat as a species. And however much progressives claim, no, of course, it isn't, we don't think like that. It has to be, because there's been, throughout the course of recent history...
The only dispute I'd have is not just a white thing.
No, it's not. Exactly. And my point is that
many black people hate other black people because they're a little bit blacker than them.
Yeah.
Arabs hate black people. Asians hate black people. And so, in fact, the basic truth is, the darker you are, the more people hate you.
Yes, and this is exactly my point, because what ties all this together over centuries and centuries of history is, as you say, white supremacism, which it is. It's white people thinking they are the dominant force in the world and that they can treat everyone else as
and they are the dominant
class
force in the world.
Yeah, which is ultimately the problem as well.
And considering their number is rather a small percentage of the world, that obviously deep inside must produce some insecurity. If I'm sitting here in my castle and I'm rich, but there's 10 million people beginning to gather outside, I'm obviously a bit nervous that they're going to break down the walls of my castle and take it for themselves. And that's, in a sense, where white supremacy and white angst comes from, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because we know that the whiter the country, the richer it is, by comparison with the browner and the blacker the country, the more eastern, the more southern the country. Now, we also know that cannot always be the case. The tables must eventually turn. But speaking of these matters, I wasn't going to mention this, but do you remember Stephen Twigg?
Yes.
Stephen Twigg, a twerp from the National Union of Students, who became a Labour MP and a Labour minister under Tony
He
Blair.
was delightful.
He's
Wasn't he?
most famous for defeating Michael Portillo, and you remember in the election, were you up for Portillo? The defeat of Portillo was a national joy, which doesn't mean that
I was
Stephen
a child,
Twigg
and
was.
I remember it. Yeah.
So Stephen Twigg, 16 years ago this day, voted for the invasion and occupation of Iraq. And he chose this day, the 16th anniversary of a war crime for which he is jointly and severally responsible, to tweet the following: Britain must continue to be a force for good in the world. Now, as soon as I saw it, I recognized that this delusion, this self-delusion, this lie that Britain has been a force for good in the world lies behind many of our problems.
Yeah.
The only time in the last several centuries that we have been a force for good in the world is between 1939 and 1945. Every blow struck before it and every blow struck after it was done for our own greedy, selfish reasons, or at least the greedy, selfish reasons of our rulers.
Indeed, yes, and that tweet by Twigg exactly sums up the problem we have. That this arrogance and this superiority complex pervades all colours of political parties.
It does,
within the Labour Party, you see it with the TIG, the splitters, you see it with Watson's Brigade, you see it with the Conservative Party, Liberals, SNP, even the Green Party to some extent are no way, shape or form perfect. And it's this arrogance, and again it's back to white supremacist ideals, even if people don't realise it or not. I think there's so many elements where it's subconscious as well.
Yeah,
and
I mean, and that's in a way linked to the special relationship with the United States, because the actual, I'd argue prevalent, certainly significant, salient mentality is this: that the world is a white man's burden, that only Uncle Sam and John Bull are white enough to really carry it, because the other whites are kind of funny tinged. That's the mentality that has driven British foreign policy for a very, very long time. And moreover, that Uncle Sam's a bit thick and we need to help him. Like Blair was George Bush's brain. Greece to America's Rome. That's the trope that I grew up on. That the United States, great, good-hearted, bluff, well-intentioned, but not very clever. So perfidious Albion, with its forked tongue, has to whisper in its ear and point it in the right direction.
Brilliant way of putting it. Yeah, no, it's spot on. I think there's what's also missed in the debate as well, briefly, because we need to check what's going on social media.
Look at social media.
We
it's
also.
Now, it's now 23. So we've got 7 minutes.
There is a brilliant book by a journalist called Will Black. It's called Psychopathic Cultures, and if you haven't read it, viewers, I suggest you get your hands on a copy. It's an excellent book. In short, and I don't want to oversimplify his work, but in short, he says and puts out for debate that there are, within society and the structures of governments, there are a small number of psychopaths and sociopaths who run the show, essentially. That if you look to some of the biggest figureheads over the past sort of decades of politics, people like Tony Blair essentially have characteristics and traits of people who have psychopathic or sociopathic tendencies. And what he says is that these tendencies by people who are in positions of power then ripple out to the people around them, and people who don't have psychopathic or sociopathic tendencies end up picking up on these tendencies and behaving in that manner as well. It's a fascinating book, and I recommend reading it, because Will Black is excellent, and my point being, by that same token, white supremacists and colonialist and imperialist attitudes, while they may not be held by every single politician who spouts that Britain is a force for good, they might not actually think like that themselves. It's probably rippled out to them subconsciously from the environment and the people in charge around them. And that is a issue which is seen across the world. And again, all of the conversations we've just had, I truly believe are ultimately species level problem. They're ones that we as humanity and as a global society have to solve ourselves, because they're across the planet. They're not necessarily just confined to these shores.
You know, I grew up loving Jesus. I still love Jesus, of course. Throughout my life, Jesus was a white guy with blonde hair, when of course he could not possibly have been.
Indeed.
It is inculcated, or it's imbibed from the earliest age, this whiteness.
Yeah.
Now, we've got a problem because we're white.
Yeah.
Both of us white with blue eyes. So we need to reach out to our brothers and explain to them that if you go on seeking to rule and dominate and exploit and loot the world on the basis of the development of your economy and military and weapons and so on, the day will come when everybody who doesn't look like us is going to get their revenge on us. And, you know, it would be better earlier to begin to mend fences and
Indeed.
begin to try and fix things, don't you think?
I think so, yes. And as you quite rightly point out, we are both white, blue-eyed, and we also need to hear more voices who aren't white and blue-eyed as well, quite frankly. I think that's
I'm not a self-hater. I mean, if somebody criticised, as Noam Chomsky put it, if somebody criticised the policies of the Italian government, would that make them a self-hating Italian?
Well, exactly.
Of course it wouldn't.
Yeah, no,
we
exactly.
we do not resile from, I quite like the way I look, and I certainly like the way you look. We do not resile from what we look like and what we are. We just want everybody to behave a bit better, if only in your own interest.
Indeed, yes.
By the way, is that a Labour Party top? Is this the Labour Rose?
No, it is not.
You could probably sell it to them.
I know.
Market
Yeah.
it.
That
Very,
could be,
very
yes.
nice.
Yeah, look a bit road, as the kids would say. What has YouTube been saying? I also must just say as well, I can hear Nicola screaming at me probably from home, saying a lot of what we're talking about boils back down to classism as well. That is, that we are controlled in hierarchies.
Well, it's the kind of only thing that matters.
Yeah, well, it is really.
How
Ultimately,
many white, blue-eyed people are in the working class desperately trying to make ends meet?
Indeed, yeah.
It's not that, I mean, it's not that every ruler, every exploiter is white, and it's certainly not that every white is a ruler and an exploiter.
No, exactly.
We are ruled and exploited in our own country by people who look just like us.
Exactly so. Classism. Let it roll off the tip of your tongue freely, please. Over to YouTube. John Partleton said, Labour need to have working class MPs, not university educated middle class do-gooders. End of. That's essentially what we've just been talking about, isn't it? Yes. We don't need people speaking on our
I was writing the other day that I was a Transport and General Workers Union Member of Parliament, and somebody said to me, what does that mean?
Yeah. No, exactly. A lot of people agreeing and liking what is me quoting Will Black's Psychopathic Cultures book.
I hadn't heard of that before. I'm leading a sheltered life. I need to listen to you more.
Yeah, it's very good. Ben Kavanagh has put, it's not just bad apples. The rise in power, either financial or political, yields an increase in hypocrisy and sociopathy. It's not universal, but it is a statistical pattern. Yes, this is what Will was talking about in his excellent book. Media not reporting, lots of Tory members saying Islamophobic comments, says Invictus. Yes, as always, go and see that show. I might try and see that.
It's really great, actually. And it's in Southwark. It's The theatre there, you're not talking, opera and grand circle. It's a very basic theatre.
Yeah.
And I think the play's better for that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I will try and get to see that. Keith Durrant says, when the policies of the rich drive the working class to desperation, they must create an enemy for those people to blame for their plight. Yes, it's exactly the othering that I was discussing. Over to the Twitter. Let me quickly scan through this.
I mean, it's busy, yeah? A lot of people watching.
I won't read out my girlfriend's tweets. That's just
fan mail.
Inherent bias, isn't it? Really. Okay. So, question for Topple Galloway show. Alex Tiffin, respect is vital. Brilliant blogger. UniversalCreditSufferer.com. Check out his website.
He's fantastic.
He wanted me to briefly talk about PACE trial. I think it'd be great to hear more from the people's expert. If you don't know about this, George, this is the campaign surrounding myalgic encephalomyelitis, or ME as it's currently known, and the PACE trial, which was a study done by numerous researchers and medical professionals in this country, which a lot of people living with the disease and a lot of their advocates claim is actually very damaging and harming. There is currently an organised smear campaign in the media against people living with ME and their advocates, because they're basically calling out PACE trial for what it was, essentially a corporate industry-backed attempt to silence and get out of the public's mindset people living with this disease, and it's all falling apart around their ears, and we're seeing the same responses to when anything that is corporate and capitalist and establishment related, when it falls apart, they start blaming
the victim.
Blame the victims on the bottom. If you want to know more about this, you can check out my website, which is mrtopple.com.
Do that.
Look at my Twitter feeds, because I wrote 3 articles yesterday on this. There'll be something coming up from the Canary, and also check out Nicola's feed, which is at Nicholas C. Jeffrey on Twitter, and also Jennifer Breas, which is at Jen Brea. But there's lots on my website. Millions Missing is the hashtag. PACE trial is the hashtag. Check it out. Alex, thank you.
That was good. I mean, I think it's really important. Nobody else is talking about that.
They're not, because they're there.
Nobody else that can get in front of a camera anyway.
No,
6th of April, me and Ken Livingston are at the Dance House in Manchester.
Gonna be good.
That is going to be really jumping. We've sold hundreds of tickets. There's still, I don't know, just under 200.
I love the way these shows with you and Ken are going well.
They are, they're really going well.
Because
They're in
it's been so-
venues that you wouldn't normally, I mean, imagine going to the Dance House and finding me and Ken Livingston there. 100 years of Labour membership between us.
Indeed. I look forward to you tangoing with him then.
Well, I don't know, I'm more of a jiver myself.
Yeah.
Well, it's been marvellous, Steve.
It has.
We're being told rather, aggressively now that we've run out of time.
Indeed.
Check us out at George Galloway, at Mr. Topple.
We will see you